This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Natalie Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Taiwan and Hong Kong on high alert as Typhoon Fung-wong nears after leaving at least 4 dead in the Philippines. Offices and schools shut, residents evacuated and landslide warnings in force. South Korea's Coast Guard races to find 9 missing crew after the capsize of a Chinese fishing boat. 2 rescued so far. Search planes and ships are combing the area. Also ousted former President Yoon Suk-yeol hit with new charges. South Korean prosecutors say he sent drones over to the north to stir tensions and justify plans for martial law. Japan's Prime Minister defends a warning that a Taiwan conflict could threaten Japan's security, angering China. Sanae Takaichi vowing a comprehensive judgment before taking any stance. U.S.-China trade truce taking shape. Beijing to suspend special port fees on American vessels, while Washington puts a pause on levies targeting Chinese ships. Ahead on the bulletin, China's Shenzhou 20 crew remains in orbit days after their scheduled return, with a suspected space debris strike said to be causing the delay. We get insights from an expert. Plus, the world's biggest climate talks open in Belém, Brazil. But as hotels fill up and accommodation prices soar, is this climate summit out of reach for many? A weakened super typhoon that cut across the Philippines yesterday is now headed for China and Taiwan. Both areas are now preparing for Typhoon Fung-wong as the storm moves west over the South China Sea. Now, the typhoon left a trail of destruction in the Philippines, killing at least 2 people and displaced more than 1 million others. Fung-wong, locally referred to as Uwan, was the 21st and the biggest storm to hit the archipelago this year. Fung-wong's gusty winds and heavy rains tore through entire communities, sweeping away homes and other structures.
Hindi po talaga kami makatulog kagabi kasi paghampas po sa yero namin, yung sa hangin po, grabe talaga, maririnig niyo po talaga, at yung mga nagsisulugan po ng mga puno.
Hindi po ako nakatulog. Yung mga apo ko, sabi ko mag-pray tayo para hindi tayo mapan. Nakaupo lang ako, nag-pray sa Panginoon. Hindi ako nakatulog nung kasagsagan ng bagyo.
Now, Hong Kong's weather forecaster has issued its number 1 warning signal as Fung-wong enters within 800 kilometers of the city. The warning is expected to remain in force until noon local time tomorrow. Now, on the mainland, Chinese officials have activated a level 4 marine disaster emergency response in anticipation of the storm. Fung-wong is expected to cause what authorities deem to be hazardous waves in the East China Sea and South China Sea. Fujian and Guangdong provinces are both on alert. Now, for more on Taiwan's typhoon readiness, we are now joined by CNA's senior correspondent, Victoria Jen, in Taipei. Victoria, first up, what kind of impact could Typhoon Fung-wong have on Taiwan if it makes landfall?
Yes, the Weather Bureau has already issued a sea warning for Typhoon Fung-wong at 5:30 p.m. local time, and land warning could follow in the next 12 hours. The storm is expected to make landfall around Wednesday, bringing torrential rain, strong winds, and large waves. The Central Mountain Range may weaken the winds once the storm crosses Taiwan, but it won't stop the rain. Forecasters warn that some parts of Hualien in eastern Taiwan, for instance, could see more than 500 millimeters of rainfall, enough to trigger flash floods and landslides. What worries officials most is Hualien's Mataian Creek in Guangfu Township. It was the worst hit area during Typhoon Ragaza in September. What happened was heavy rain caused a barrier lake above Guangfu Township to burst. Within minutes, nearly 60 million tons of water and mud roared down the valley, wiping out homes, bridges, and farmland, and killing at least 18 people. That's why Mataian Creek is now under a red alert. The existing barrier lake already holds about 1.5 million cubic meters of water. If rainfall exceeds 800 millimeters in 24 hours and another landslide blocks the river, a much larger lake could form, and if that dam gives way, floodwaters could rush downstream at over 4,000 cubic meters per second. The impact could be devastating, and that's why Guangfu Township has started evacuating more than 600 residents with shelters ready at nearby schools. President William Lai has urged everyone across Taiwan to take precautions. Here's what he had to say.
花莲的堰塞目前又提高到红色警戒，所以我希望我们全国民众面对这一次相当罕见的台风，那我们一定做好防台准备。不管是在台湾哪一个城市，通通要做好防台准备，因为它的路径非常罕见。
So even if the mountains blunt the winds, the rain could still be deadly, and officials say they are determined not to see another tragedy like Ragaza.
So, Vic, authorities are no strangers to, preparing for a storm like typhoon like this. So, how are they doing just that for Fung-wong? And also, what are some of the biggest risks involved as the storm approaches?
Yes, authorities in Hualien County, for one, are taking no chances this time. The focus is on Mata'an Creek, where the Barrier Lake alert remains at red. Authorities have set up real-time monitoring systems to check water levels and slope movement around the clock. If signs of collapse appear or water rises too quickly, evacuation orders will go out immediately. Shelters and rescue teams are already on standby in Guangfu and Fengling townships. The Weather Bureau says Fung-wong will bring heavy rain and even coastal flooding before it makes landfall. Flights and ferry services may be suspended as the sea warning remains in effect, and mountain roads could close once rainfall intensifies. The central mountain range might weaken the typhoon after landfall, but it could also trap moisture, meaning the rain may last for days. Officials say the key now is early action. Evacuate before roads are cut off, keep communication lines open, and make sure emergency supplies are ready. Now, authorities are clearly treating this as a full-scale emergency, doing everything possible to protect lives before the worst of the storm hits.
Hey, thanks so very much for that report, CNA senior correspondent Victoria Jian in Taipei. Do stay safe. Now, South Korea's Coast Guard has launched a search operation for 9 missing crew members after a Chinese fishing vessel capsized off the country's west coast. State media CCTV says Chinese officials have confirmed that 11 people were on board when the boat overturned about 150 kilometers southwest of the port city of Gunsan. 2 workers were rescued by a nearby commercial ship. South Korea's Coast Guard says 4 patrol vessels and 3 aircraft, including a rescue helicopter, have been deployed to the area. Now, the incident comes a day after another Chinese fishing boat capsized in international waters, about 80 kilometers from South Korea's southwestern Gegado. Of the 11 people on board, half a dozen were rescued by another Chinese vessel operating nearby. South Korea's Coast Guard later found 2 others in cardiac arrest. A search operation for the remaining 3 missing crew members is underway. Well, the search for 2 missing workers in a boiler tower collapse in the South Korean city of Ulsan has entered its 5th day. 7 workers were initially trapped at the decommissioned power plant site, which was slated for demolition. 3 bodies have since been recovered, but 4 workers remain unaccounted for, including 2 who are presumed dead. Overnight drone searches have failed to locate the missing. Officials plan to bring in heavy equipment this week to lift the collapsed debris and speed up the search. The 60-meter tall tower was in the process of being taken down when it collapsed on Thursday and has been in use for 40 years before the site shut. Police, meantime, have questioned more than 10 people, focusing on possible discrepancies between the demolition plan and the actual work carried out, and whether safety protocols were followed. Formal criminal proceedings, including potential indictments, could begin once search and rescue efforts conclude. A South Korea's special prosecutor indicted former President Yoon Sung-yeol on additional charges of aiding an enemy state related to his short-lived martial law imposition last year. Well, Yoon, who is currently behind bars and on trial for insurrection, has said he declared martial law to sound alarm over wrongdoing by opposition parties and sought to protect the country from anti-state elements. Well, CNA's senior correspondent Lim Yun-suk tells us more.
Ousted former South Korean President Yoon Sung-yeol faces more criminal charges. As prosecutors on Monday said, he dispatched drones over North Korea in order to stoke tensions on the Korean peninsula and justify his plan to impose martial law last year. According to a special investigation team probing the charges, Yoon and his top defense officials were charged with abusing their power and helping the enemy over alleged drone operations carried out about 2 months before martial law was declared.
무인기 평양 침투 등의 방법으로 북한의 공격을 유도하여 전쟁 또는 무력 충돌을 야기하려 하였다는 범죄 혐의 및 이를 통하여 비상계엄 선포를 하는 방법으로 내란, 군사 반란을 시도했다는 범죄 혐의 사건 수사 결과 금일 윤석열 전 대통령, 김용현 전 국방부 장관, 여인영 전 방첩사령관을 일반 이적 및 직권남용 권리행사 방해죄로 공소를 제기하였습니다.
North Korea had accused the South of flying drones over its capital Pyongyang in October 2024 to drop propaganda leaflets. Then Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun initially denied it, but later the military said it could not confirm whether the incident had taken place. At the time, tensions on the Korean peninsula were high, with Pyongyang warning of strong military retaliation. Those fears died down eventually, but on December 3rd, Yoon cited threats from North Korea's communist forces as one of the reasons for imposing martial law. That triggered months of protests in South Korea. In April, he was removed from office by the Constitutional Court and could face life imprisonment or even a death penalty if found guilty of leading an insurrection. Former President Yoon's fall from power has divided public opinion, with his supporters calling the investigation politically motivated, while his critics say it's a test of accountability and the rule of law. Lim Yun-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Well, meantime, South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun has met with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet in Phnom Penh. Seoul says the two sides have agreed to strengthen cooperation on fighting online scams and other transnational crimes. Well, the nation's police chiefs have also launched a joint task force against South Korean nationals who are involved in scam operations based in Cambodia. Well, that's after the two sides agreed last month to set this up to help tackle the issue. The move was agreed after the death of a Korean student in Cambodia in August who had been lured by a scam ring. Now, his death prompted the government to send a delegation to Phnom Penh for urgent talks. The online scam industry has grown sharply in recent years, with many syndicates based in Southeast Asia. The United Nations and other agencies have estimated that cyber scams earn international criminal gangs billions of dollars annually. A Japanese Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, has defended remarks last week which suggested that a military conflict over Taiwan has the potential to amount to an existential risk for Japan. Now, Ms. Takaichi stressed in Parliament today that the government will make a comprehensive judgment before determining if it falls into such a scenario. Her acknowledgement reportedly offers more clarity compared to previous administrations on how Tokyo would view a possible military invasion of Taiwan. The Japanese leader's earlier comments sparked an angry response from Xue Jian, China's consul general in Osaka, who criticized Ms. Takaichi's stance on X. He made a threat over Tokyo's potential involvement in a Taiwan emergency in a separate and now deleted post. Now, that pointed comment prompted Japan to file a complaint to Beijing, with top government spokesperson Minoru Kihara saying that, quote, the post is extremely inappropriate for a Chinese diplomatic mission head. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry defended its diplomat's post on a social media platform, saying it's a response to the Japanese leader's, quote, wrong and dangerous remarks on Taiwan. Now, China views Taiwan as its own territory and has said it will not rule out the use of force to reunify with the island. Well, the break's up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, a slowdown in TSMC sales growth. Investors fret over the AI bubble, while industry players remain optimistic. And reports say that China's internet firms are restarting consumer loans. Roland Lim standing by with all the details. Hello again. You're watching East Asia tonight, and it is now time for a business update with Roland Lim. So, Roland, there are signs that Japan's new prime minister is playing the long game when it comes to the economy.
You are right, Oteli. Japan's prime minister says that she wants to set fresh fiscal target that stretches over several years. Hanae Takaichi explained that the longer timeline would give the government more flexibility in spending, even if that means backing away from earlier promises to rein in debt. Ms. Takaichi also urged the Bank of Japan to take it slow on raising interest rates. The Bank of Japan exited a decade-long massive stimulus program last year and raised interest rates to 0.5% in January. Since then, it has kept the rate steady, but there are signs that policymakers at the central bank are leaning towards a hike as soon as next month. Takushi Aida, the Prime Minister's economic advisor, says the BOJ should avoid raising interest rates in December because the economy likely contracted in the third quarter. He says the government should cushion the blow to households from rising cost of living until real income turns positive. Minutes from the October central bank meeting show there was support for a rate hike. Now, of the 13 opinions on the monetary policy, 8 said that interest rates should go up soon. Some say they need to be sure companies can keep raising wages as part of Japan's economic recovery. A look at how the Japanese market closed after that news. The broader Nikkei 225 ending the day 1.26% higher. The broader Topix index up by 0.56%. And the Japanese currency weaker against the greenback by 0.5%, 154.11 to the dollar. Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing reporting slower growth in revenue for the month of October amid growing concerns over the AI bubble. Still, shares ended the day in the green at 1% higher. The chip maker saw sales rise nearly 17% on year. That's the slowest pace since February of 2024. Analysts are expecting TSMC's revenue to rise 16% in the current quarter. Global tech stocks were jolted by a sudden slump last week amid mounting investor unease over the sector's sky-high valuations. Wall Street executives warning of a market correction, while some analysts drew similarities to the dot-com bubble 25 years ago. But AI industry executives remain optimistic about growth. According to Bloomberg estimates, giants Meta, Alphabet, Amazon, and Microsoft will collectively spend more than $400 billion next year to fund their artificial intelligence build-out. Now, that's more than a 20% jump from this year as firms race to secure a stranglehold in the emerging technology. China has suspended special port fees on U.S. vessels for a year as Washington puts a pause on levies targeting Chinese ships. Now, it's part of the two nations' trade truce after a meeting between their presidents last month. China had imposed higher port fees on ships operated or built in the U.S. that visited Chinese ports. It was a tit-for-tat response to levies imposed by the Trump administration on Chinese ships, which were aimed at disrupting China's lead in the shipbuilding sector. Separately, Beijing will be lifting sanctions for a year against American subsidiaries of Hanwha Ocean, one of South Korea's biggest shipmakers. The firms were accused of supporting the U.S. government's investigation that found that China's dominance in the industry unreasonable. A planned counter-probe against that investigation has also been shelved for a year. Gold rallying with expectations of a U.S. Fed rate cut growing in December. A spot gold is currently up by more than 2%, $4,079.37 an ounce. That's also with a slew of weak economic data raising worries over a global slowdown. Now, gold tends to do well in a low interest rate environment and during economic uncertainties. Market participants now seeing a 67% chance of a rate cut, according to the CME FedWatch tool. In Asia, China's gold consumption declined for the first 3 quarters of this year, down nearly 8% from the same period last year. Now, that's with high prices of the precious metal dampening interest in gold jewelry. Looking ahead, Beijing's reduction of the value-added tax exemption on gold purchases is expected to further diminish gold's appeal to both consumers and industry. In Greater China, stocks are off to a firm start for the week on the back of inflation data, which was released on Sunday. Now, it showed that consumer prices rose in October on the back of strong holiday demand, but factory gate prices continued to decline. Shanghai Composite closing out the day 0.53% higher. Shenzhen up just a slight touch, 0.18% higher. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index 1.55 in the green. A report says that China's internet platforms are quietly reviving consumer lending. The Reuters piece suggests that after a years-long crackdown, the platforms may be taking China's push to make household borrowing cheaper as a sign of regulatory easing. Now, according to the report, Beijing wants to spur weak domestic consumption while managing a trade dispute with Washington.
Now, to get the lowdown on China's easing of consumer lending, Roland is right here in the hot seat. So in a nutshell, what's changed?
Well, first, there's the change in tone. After years of tightening, authorities suddenly decided to move from calling it a crackdown to a normalized oversight. And then the second thing was a change in policy. Now, in August, Beijing actually rolled out subsidies for consumer lending, but explicitly included 2 internet companies and as well as Tencent's WeBank in the list of traditional banking institutions. So many took that to mean that this was an explicit permission for these online fintech firms to start lending again.
So let's just backtrack a little and tell us, why was there a crackdown on consumer lending in the first place?
Right, yeah. So that goes back to Ant Financial's blockbuster IPO, which was suddenly called off. Beijing then did a hard reset on these fintechs. Fintechs were forced to be folded into regulated holding financial companies. They were forced to raise capital. They were also told to curb leverage on co-lending facilities, as well as to rein in the use of consumer data when it comes to credit scores. So you fast forward to today, now these fintech firms are now back, but they are back with banking-grade oversight or guardrails.
Okay, so but we've got weak consumer confidence, we've got property slump as well. So why exactly is Beijing relaxing credit at this point?
Precisely, it's because regulators still remain cautious. I mean, it's not opening the floodgates, it's more like a controlled thaw. I mean, yes, you're right. I mean, consumer confidence is now still poor because people are afraid of losing their jobs. The property market is still in the doldrums, and because people are not confident enough to want to spend. So this online lending is a way of actually easing that transition, especially when you do it through online apps. It's so much easier. So research house UBS is predicting that these online originated consumer loans will actually start to increase next year and that profits will actually be back for this particular sector.
Okay, so then picking up what you said about regulators remaining cautious, right? And then what exactly are some of the pitfalls for the borrowers and lenders? Yeah,
I mean, from the borrower's point of view, I mean, these apps make it very easy to borrow. They also hide the cost of the borrowing. So that means that you might not know as a consumer how much you're getting yourself in for. Let's not also forget that this also encourages people to roll over their debt. So you're paying more of that interest as you roll over than you are touching the principal. And then finally, of course, some of these people are using these funds to speculate in stocks, in currencies, in commodities like gold even. But don't forget, when that margin call comes, well, then they might be in trouble. And of course, for the lenders, of course, when they don't get paid for their loans because these people have lost their jobs or they're out of their homes, and that's when the trouble sets in.
Okay, so Roland, you've explained to us a fair bit, but let's say, our viewers need that one big takeaway. What would that be?
Well, that Beijing is actually opening up the taps for consumer credit, but it's actually just a drip. It's not turning the faucet completely, right? And of course, people only borrow if they are confident in the economy. So that also remains to be seen.
Okay, well, always good to have you in the hot seat, Roland Lim there. Guess I'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks for that. Well, we are going to go for another short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, a suspected debris strike delays the return of China's astronauts from its space station. What could have gone wrong? Well, we'll be asking an expert. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China and Taiwan on high alert as Typhoon Fung-wong approaches after slamming into the Philippines, leaving a trail of destruction and at least 4 people dead. Ousted former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol hit with new charges for aiding an enemy state and abusing power in relation to his short-lived martial law imposition last year. And China defends its diplomats' criticism of Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks after she told Parliament last week that an attack on Taiwan could be deemed a situation threatening Japan's survival. Now, China last week suspended the Earth-bound trip for its Shenzhou 20 crew from the Tiangong space station after suspected space debris hit the return vessel. The delay of a seemingly routine return highlighting not only the inherent perils of space travel, but also a problem of our own making in the race for the final frontier. Space debris or space junk can range from tiny flecks of paint to defunct satellites, all floating in orbit hundreds of kilometers above Earth. Even small debris can cause major damage due to their relative speed. Now, the rapid increase in space junk in recent years has led to growing calls for cooperation in managing space traffic. And to help us unpack all of this, we are joined now by Professor Quentin Parker, Director, Lab for Space Research at the University of Hong Kong. Well, thanks, Professor, for joining us this evening. Now, it's been four or 5 days and no real updates at this point. So what are some of the possible scenarios could be playing out that's in the way of a reasonably quick and safe return for the astronauts?
Well, of course, there is the Shenzhou 20 module that took the current new crew up that can be used to return to Earth. So there is that backup if they need it. But the Shenzhou 20 crew module that's currently docked that was going to take them down does look like it's received some damage. I am surprised that I haven't heard any updates about when the return of the Shenzhou 20 crew is scheduled for. So that seems to indicate that perhaps the damage is a bit more extensive than had been thought, and that the repairs, they might not have everything they need to properly repair it. So the worst case scenario is that the Shenzhou 20 module is no longer safe to return taikonauts to Earth. So that would mean that they'd have to send up a new module. I mean, they've got one that Shenzhou 20 crew can go down in the Shenzhou 21 module and then just keep doing that over crew rotations, but that's not ideal.
Now we've seen
it doesn't also give a redundancy. Yeah,
and we've seen those clips and we've played it. The Tiangong crew, they're baking chicken wings in your space oven. And those are just light-hearted glimpses of life in orbit.
Amazing.
Yeah, but Professor, at what point do we start to worry that something's gone seriously wrong up there?
Well, I don't think there's anything gone seriously wrong in terms of the immediate health of the crew. They've got plenty of supplies for many weeks, and the Tiangong, the space station can comfortably house 6 taikonauts for quite a long time. They normally have at least 1 week of changeover between the crew rotations every 6 months. But this is an unexpected problem that's arisen. Well, it's not unexpected. I mean, they didn't expect it, but space debris has become such a serious issue. I mean, it's something I care a lot about, and I work on it, and I investigate it, and I talk about it. It's because it's becoming existential to the future of the space ecosystem that we use for most of the satellites and the space stations. They're in low Earth orbit from a few hundred to 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, but they're getting increasingly full of debris. And this debris is starting to create problems. I mean, Starlink satellites having to maneuver out the way to avoid debris on a regular basis is going up by a factor of 10 in the last few years in terms of maneuvers. So yes, it's becoming very, very serious indeed in the threat of space debris.
When we talk about debris management, it appears, I mean, that there isn't much coordination between, say, the US and China on how they're going to get rid of all that debris. This lack of communication, I mean, how dangerous is it in practical terms?
Well, first of all, your first point about there's no debris management. There's only management in the sense of space situational awareness, where satellites that are currently active can maneuver out of the way of a potentially hazardous piece of debris. That is happening. So that level of management is going on. But in terms of management of the problem and solving it, that's not really happening at all. Now, you mentioned about the communication between NASA and the Chinese equivalents. Well, in the past, NASA would contact China and ask them, oh, we got this conjunction of satellites, we're going to move something out of the way, just letting you know. For the first time last week, China did it in reverse. China contacted NASA and said, there's going to be a conjunction of these satellites, we're warning you so you can take evasive action. So this kind of thing, it used to be one way, now it's going both ways. And that's because China's ability to monitor space debris is improving considerably. So they're now able to play a bit more of an active role.
So we are seeing that the skies are getting, more crowded, right? I mean, there's Starlink, all these mega constellations, orbital data centers, etc. I mean, are we actually heading into an unsustainable commercial space race that governments, just simply can't control?
Oh, yes. I saw some very scary slides at the World Internet Conference in Wuzhen a couple of days ago, where plans for space satellite constellations are going into the hundreds of thousands of satellites. There's a couple of tens of thousands up there at the moment, 12,000 or so active satellites at the moment. Most of them are Starlink, but there are many others, and China's building its own constellations. And there's big plans, for 30, 40, 50,000 constellations of satellites. So at the same time, the debris problem is getting worse all the time. The number of satellites going up is more than exceeding the number that are burning up in the atmosphere and coming down. So even though every spacefaring nation is trying to be more responsible and have its satellites able to deorbit themselves after their useful lifetimes around 5 years, that's not really the issue anymore, because they're putting up so much more every month that more than is coming down, that the risks are just increasing all the time of something called the Kessler syndrome, which, as I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers now know, is a catastrophic cascading collapse of the entire low Earth orbit ecosystem, where most of the satellites are, due to a runaway debris field, where satellites smash into a satellite, creates a lot of debris, those debris crash into another satellite, creates more debris, and so on and so forth. And it's called the Kessler syndrome. Very scary. And by some calculations, some modeling of this situation means it could happen as early as 2035 to 2050. If that does happen, it's kind of game over for the way we live our lives in the modern world, with all our mobile phones and internet connectivity and banking and commerce and trades, instant trade, all of that kind of disappears in the way it's currently done.
Oh, hopefully that's not going to happen and be happening anytime soon. Well, thank you so much, Professor, for shedding light on the science and the stakes of, having all that space debris. Professor Quentin Parker, their Director, Lab for Space Research at the University of Hong Kong. Now, turning our attention to other news now, a hacking group linked to North Korea has reportedly launched a new form of cyber attack in the south. It allows the group to remotely take control of smartphones and computers and delete personal data without the user's knowledge. A report by a South Korean cybersecurity institute found that the hackers had spread malware through popular messaging app KakaoTalk. They were said to have stolen account information for Google and other major domestic IT services before wiping out data and remotely resetting infected devices. The report described the method, which combines device neutralization and account-based propagation, as unprecedented among known North Korean cyber attack operations. Thailand has halted its peace declaration with Cambodia after 2 of its soldiers were injured by a landmine in Sisaket province near the Cambodian border. The Royal Thai Army says the explosion occurred during a patrol. Thailand's Prime Minister said that whatever Bangkok has been pursuing with Phnom Penh must be put on hold until there is clarity. Mr. Anutin Chanwirakul added that the blast shows animosity towards his country's security has not diminished. The planned release of 18 Cambodian prisoners of war on Wednesday is also suspended for now. The landmine blast took place at 9:36 a.m. local time, causing a Thai soldier to lose his lower right leg, while another reportedly suffered chest tightness. Both were immediately airlifted to a hospital for treatment. The Thai-Cambodia border has seen several landmine explosions in recent months. Thailand has accused Cambodia of planting the mines, calling it a clear violation of its sovereignty and a serious obstacle to the ongoing ceasefire. Cambodia has rejected those allegations, insisting the mines are remnants of past conflicts and accusing Thai troops of straying off course. We'll have more of the story on Asia Tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore-Hong Kong time. Coming up on East Asia Tonight, the world's biggest climate talks open in Belém, Brazil, amid concerns over its remote location and lack of accommodation. We'll take a look at what this means for locals and the thousands of delegates attending COP30 this year. And Hong Kong hosts an AI and robotics summit in partnership with Greater Bay Area cities, aiming to stake its claim in the booming sector. Hong Kong is ramping up cross-border partnerships with Greater Bay Area cities to stake its claim in the booming AI and robotics sectors. The 4th edition of the GBA International AI and Robotics Summit opened in the city today. Now, this year's event features humanoid robots from top Chinese firms such as Unitree and UB Tech. Competition for dominance in this field has intensified, with companies rushing to unveil new models capable of performing complex and eye-catching stunts.
中國國內已經有一啲，例如係啲拳嘅表演啊，或者甚至無拳擊嘅表演賽啊，咁已經本身係做到一個喺國內叫做引流效果咧，即係佢 draw the public to the mall 啊，即係喺商場度去搞啲表演。
喺面部表情咧，起碼係有16個即係自己built in嘅微表情嘅。咁同埋咧，佢對應嘅咧有好多嘅柔性嘅關節。咁呢個柔性關節嘅話咧，佢可以咧就好好咁喺做呢個喺具身呢個做舞蹈啊，做其他溝通啊嗰陣時候咧，可以咧有提供呢種我哋稱之為程序價值嘅。
China's robotics industry has grown rapidly in recent years, fueled by stronger government support. Earlier this year, officials announced plans for a government-backed fund that will mobilize 1 trillion yuan, or about $137 billion from social capital to support technology startups. But Japanese engineer Hiroshi Ishiguro, known as the father of humanoid robots, told CNA he hasn't yet seen a real business potential in some of the humanoid robots available today.
We are showing the dancing robot. We are showing the robot that work and behaves like actor and actress, right? But it is just a demonstration, right? I'm not sure, right, how we can develop the real market. Each country may have different role, right? So, United States, they're leading the AI areas. China is leading the mass production of a humanoid robots. Japan is leading the sensor technologies, right? We need to work together. Okay, it's the same thing that happens for the car, right, and the computers.
The COP30 climate conference in Belém, Brazil is finally underway, despite controversy over its remote location and chaos over the lack of accommodation. CNA reporter Rachel Tang reports from Belém on what this means for locals and the delegation.
Bruno Souza is a healthcare administrative assistant in Belém. To meet the healthcare needs of incoming COP30 visitors, the local government ramped up his training to take up more shifts at the local hospital.
Inclusive, graças à COP30, acabei entrando na policlínica, na área da saúde, justamente para dar esse apoio às novas pessoas que estão chegando em Belém, estão conhecendo Belém, são mais de 50 mil pessoas, e foi momento que eu tive de oportunidade, aproveitando,
Bruno says many Brazilians like him were roped in to help bolster the workforce, especially those in the hospitality and tourism sectors. For a long time, there were doubts the remote city of Belém was well equipped to host the 50,000-odd attendees coming for the conference. Particularly controversial was the housing shortage, which was immediately apparent when we arrived after traveling 50 hours to get here. We've just moved into our accommodations, and as you can probably tell, this is not a hotel, it's a local resident's own apartment. And many locals have actually moved out of their own homes just to help the city host COP30. And we've also heard that attendees are staying on cruise ships and even remodeled love motels just to be here. Our host, Joanna Anshaw, says renting out her residence was not only a chance to help plug the lodgings gap, but it was also a windfall.
We have a very big demand on people staying somewhere, for people who are coming to work here, to COP30. So we do have another place to stay in the city, and it wouldn't be a problem for us to rent the place. So we just saw this opportunity to make some money also.
Listings on the official COP30 site easily hit at least $1,000 a night for a home like Joanna's. And this was after a slew of hotels were already constructed in a flurry, aptly named after the event they were built for. Belém's remote location also meant crucial voices couldn't make the trek and pay the price to attend. Climate expert Benjamin Horton is not attending this year.
If I go there, it takes away from somebody else in my university going there, or somebody else from Hong Kong going there. Okay, so I give up my spot to somebody else. And then thirdly, it's logistically difficult from Asia to get there. If I was in North America, it's logistically easy. Yeah. But, you know, it's one of the harder destinations, even from an international hub like Singapore or Hong Kong, to actually get all the way to Brazil.
It's a balancing act for the Brazilian government that weighed the rainforest destination against the accessibility of global guests, and the delegations deciding who gets to be part of crucial climate negotiations this year in person and who doesn't. Rachel Ting, CNA, Belém, Brazil.
Well, you heard from Professor Benjamin Horton earlier in Rachel's story. Now, he explains why some countries remain reluctant to move away from fossil fuels, even as renewable energy becomes far cheaper.
First COP meeting was in 1995, and if the ultimate objective is to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's obviously been a failure. In 1995, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was some 360 parts per million by volume. We now have record-breaking levels of 425 parts per million by volume. The amount of carbon dioxide that went in the atmosphere in 2024 was more than any other single year since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But we have made progress. Again, if I go back to the Paris meeting, by the time of COP26 in Glasgow, countries had agreed to reduce their greenhouse gases. We had increases in our technology.